Hello, my fair friends. I'm Ruby Ruse, and today on Fairy Fortunes, I'm going to give you 3 spells to help you repel people who want to police your spiritual practice.
If you would like to learn about fairy folklore, delve into modern fairy faith spirituality, and explore fun and fanciful fairy-themed events, please subscribe to Fairy Fortunes for new videos every Friday.
If you're interested in working with fairy spirits, you're probably going to encounter some negativity in your practice. There's going to be some people who are going to warn you against working with the fairy spirits, saying that it's way too dangerous and you don't have enough experience to handle it. Or you may encounter people who think that your interest in unicorns and pixies is utterly ridiculous. And both are examples of spiritual abuse. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, spiritual abuse includes being ridiculed, insulted, and being shamed for your spiritual beliefs. The reason that I bring this up is that I want to make it clear that spiritual abuse incorporates a lot more than just a religious organization taking advantage of their inexperienced members. Spiritual abuse can occur between families, it can occur between domestic partners, and it even can occur between members of the same religious community. And it's the element of spiritual community members that I want to focus on today, because the act of policing another person's spiritual practice is abuse. Before I get into the spells, I want to talk about 2 different types of spiritual policers. The first type sees themselves as a protector. They won't take ownership of their abuse because in their minds, they are trying to protect you from yourself. But if your spiritual practices are not causing you to be suicidal, if they're not causing you to cause harm to yourself, and they're not causing you to harm another person, your spiritual beliefs are really no one else's business. It's between you and your concept of divinity and the larger forces at work in the universe. The second type of spiritual policer sees themselves as an authority figure. These are people that believe that they have superior knowledge and they have no problem looking down their noses at people whose practices they have judged as being superficial. Now, the definition of superficial is something that is on the surface or inauthentic. I do think that spiritual practices can be inauthentic. What I would use as an example for this is a person who professes very loudly that they are a member of a particular religious practice, but in their own words and actions, they are not acting in accordance to their own spiritual beliefs. And it is that hypocrisy that makes them inauthentic. I would make the argument that all of the authority type of spiritual policers are inauthentic in their spiritual practice because they're so busy looking at the practices of other people and judging them harshly that they do not spend any time reflecting and looking within. So the first spell that I would like to share with you returns that focus back onto the spiritual policer. It makes them look at their own actions and their own beliefs and removes it from you. And so I call this spell Forcing the Mirror. This spell requires a piece of reflective jewelry. Now, if you happen to have a piece of jewelry like this one that I'm showing you here that does actually have a mirror on it, you can use that. Or you can use a piece of jewelry that has a stone that reflects light, and you could even use a watch because you can use the watch as a light-catching and reflective surface. So to charge the piece of jewelry, all you have to do is simply quiet your mind, place the jewelry between your hands, and say to yourself, "Mine to me, you to yours." Then what you're going to do is when you encounter a person who is trying to police your spiritual practice, you're simply going to turn so that the jewelry or your watch faces that person directly, and you're simply going to ask them the question, why does this matter so much to you? Now, this is a very simple spell. I said simple, it's not easy, because the next part of the spell is actually the most difficult part. You have to allow the spiritual policer to answer the question, and when they answer it, you simply have to accept it for its face value. And once they have finished stating their piece, the only thing that you can say in response is, okay. The point of the Forcing the Mirror spell is that you are returning the focus back onto the person who is trying to police your practice. Whatever they have to say is not about you. If you start to defend your spiritual practice, if you say anything other than okay, you are accepting what they have said and placing it onto yourself. By saying okay, you are acknowledging what they said, but it is their belief and has nothing to do with you. The other thing about saying okay in a very flat, monotone voice is that it will end the conversation. If you say anything else, you are engaging them in a reciprocal dialogue. And once again, you are making whatever they have to say about you. And with spiritual policers, it's not about you. You have to let them be. Spiritual policers have two main goals. The first of which is that they are trying to control your behavior. They're trying to manipulate your practice to tailor it to their comfort level. The second goal is they are trying to obtain an emotional reaction from you. They want you to feel confused. They want you to be defiant. They want you to be angry, because your emotional response makes them feel powerful. The stronger and more negative your reaction, the more justified and righteous they feel. So the second spell that I have for you addresses that emotional need of the spiritual policer. And it's actually taken from a technique that is used against abusive people. And it's named for it as well. This is called the Gray Rock spell. The cornerstone of this spell hinges on your ability to provide the spiritual policer with absolutely no emotional reaction. You are trying to embody the concept of a boring gray rock. Much like the previous spell, you're going to want to limit your responses because you do not want to engage the policer in a conversation. Remember that they are trying to get an emotional reaction from you. They are trying to get you to defend yourself. So you want to keep your responses very non-criminal and bland. You're going to keep saying, okay, and that is all you're going to say. The reason for this is that you are depriving them of that emotional reaction they are so desperate to have. They will be forced then to leave you alone to seek out a more accommodating target. To perform the Gray Rock spell, you're going to need a pentacle and also some kind of gray stone. You're going to place the rock inside of the pentacle. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the emotional realm from the stone. We're going to do that by utilizing the pentacle. Now, each of the spires of the pentacle represent one of the elements. The top spire represents spirit. The upper right spire represents water. The lower right represents fire. The lower left represents earth. And the upper right represents air. So to remove the emotional element from the stone, we're going to want to start at that upper right spire. And to remove the emotion, we're going to trace the pentacle in a counterclockwise motion. So we're going to move this way and then down, up, down, and coming back to the same point. Now the second part of this spell is that we want to take the earthiness of this gray stone and we're going to fortify the rock's innate qualities. And to do that, instead of tracing a counterclockwise pentacle, we're going to be tracing a clockwise pentacle, starting from that lower left point. And now, while we think about the strength, the coolness, the stability of that rock, we are going to trace a clockwise star on our pentacle, coming back to that earth point. Now that the talisman is charged, you can place this in your pocket or somewhere else on your person, perhaps in a purse or some kind of messenger bag. Or to even add more strength and power, you can hold it in your hand as you're facing a person who is trying to police you spiritually. What you're doing is you are embodying the power of this boring gray rock. Another definition of the word superficial is that something only appears to be true until it is more closely examined. However, one of my favorite authors, Gretchen Rubin, wrote that one of the secrets to adulthood is that the opposite of a great truth is also true. Spirituality functions on faith, and faith is beyond science. You can't take the scientific method and apply it to faith, because if you try to use an experiment, you're never going to be able to replicate or predict the outcomes when it comes to faith. Faith is just not something that's going to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. My personal journey with faith began with Christianity that was given to me by my very skeptical parents. And because of their skepticism, we all journeyed into agnosticism together. When I left my parents' household, I became an animist. And then I went into paganism with a very monotheist view. And now I am a polytheist animist who is actively pursuing learning about the fairy faith, and I'm doing that learning as I practice it. And why I'm telling you the basis of my spiritual journey is because just because I left Christianity doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that it wasn't true for me. Every religion has people who condemn others for a spiritual practice that they themselves do not follow. And that is hypocritical and superficial of them. But there is no way to accurately qualify whether a person's spiritual faith practices are untrue. If you examine someone else's faith and you find it not to work for you, that doesn't mean that it's inherently superficial and wrong. Civilized human society found it necessary to categorize certain behaviors in order to promote an atmosphere of cooperation. So, for example, committing murder is not cooperative. Taking someone else's belongings is not cooperative. Judging somebody based only on their gender, their skin color, their, oh, I don't know, ding ding, spiritual practices is not cooperative. So there are certain behaviors that are wrong in human society. But if I'm the one criticizing and judging someone else's spiritual practice, then I'm the one in the wrong. I'm the one committing an act of abuse. The point I'm trying to make is that it really isn't our place to police other people's spiritual practices. Now, if I think that someone is committing an act of murder or of theft or is discriminating against a group of people or an individual, then the responsible thing for me to do is to report it to the appropriate authorities. But if I'm just annoyed by someone else's spiritual practices, that's my problem. And I have to do some personal work to figure out why someone else's truth is so threatening to my own. And here's a hard truth. We are not responsible for other people's issues. And we can't make other people accept us, and we can't make other people love us. And let's just say that they're willing to accept us and love us, but on a certain set of terms. We have no control over that. We may find that their acceptance, that their love is not enough. Or maybe in some circumstances, like in the case of spiritual policing, they may in fact be abusing us. Love is a very complicated emotion. And sometimes we don't always get to choose who we love, but we can choose who we are with. Bunny Mom! The final spell is called Cutting the Cord, and it's the rabbit in the room because it's one of the most difficult spells that anyone could ever do. Cutting someone out of your life is painful and challenging, but sometimes it's the best thing that you can do for yourself and for the other person involved. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, is allowing the person to be who they are and not who you want them to be. For the Cutting the Cord spell, you will need a candle and a very simple knife. What you're going to do is you're going to take the knife and pass it through the flame. This is simply symbolic, so you don't have to worry about really getting the blade in there. It's a symbolic action. So you're just going to pass the blade through the fire of the candle. Then you're going to imagine that connection between the person that you're trying to separate yourself from and you. And you're going to imagine that there is a cord running between you, connecting the two of you heart to heart. So with that hot knife, you're going to take a hold of that cord in your mind's eye, and you're going to take that hot, charged knife, and you're going to simply cut that cord. And when you symbolically cut that spiritual cord between you, you're going to say, I release us. And as you cut that cord, you're going to imagine that cord instantly cauterizing the cord between you and freeing yourself. So have you encountered a person that wanted to police your spiritual practice? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes by sharing our stories, we can inspire each other and help each other learn and grow and provide support for one another. So I do hope that you will share your story with us here on Fairy Fortunes. And with that, Have a magical day.